Listen, if it were so easy to distinguish between what is clutter and what is not, we'd all be living streamlined lives with only the stuff that we love and use. Just saying that clutter is anything that is surplus to requirements. Clutter is anything that negatively impacts you. Clutter is, anything that doesn't spark joy. Those things are definitely helpful guiding principles, but sometimes we need a little extra information. Like, we need to know how to be able to recognize it. Let's go. How's it going? It's Laura, and I want to give a disclaimer right off the bat before we dive into it, because there can definitely be parallels drawn between relationship red flags and clutter red flags. And obviously this video is supposed to be lighthearted, it's supposed to be a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it is not in any way meant to diminish how you're feeling if you feel unsafe or uneasy or deeply unhappy in a relationship. If that is true for you, then please reach out to a supportive friend or family member, maybe local law enforcement, a trusted medical professional, or some sort of crisis hotline. Domestic abuse or any form of abuse is not something to be taken lightly. So while in this video there can definitely be moments where it sounds like I could be referring to either clutter or a relationship, like I said, this video is purely tongue-in-cheek. It is not meant to make light of a very serious situation. So I want to start this list with kind of a more general one. We'll definitely get into more specific ones, but this is something that I have been dealing with recently, and if you watch my recent videos, you probably have heard me talk about, and that is the silent to-do list effect. Generally what I'm referring to here is if you don't feel at peace in your home, if you do not feel comfortable, if you don't feel secure, if you don't feel like your home is your sanctuary, if you can't fully relax in your home, that is a red flag that there is clutter about. Your stuff is telling you things to do. And the most obvious example of this is when you see a pile of laundry, mentally you're thinking, and it could be consciously or even subconsciously, you're thinking, I need to fold that stuff and put it away. That's a more kind of in your face example, but there are plenty of others that may not be as obvious. So an example that I had was I had an old iPad that was sitting around, and every time I saw it, I kept thinking, I need to wipe the information off that iPad and recycle it. I'm sure you have something in your home, probably in your line of sight right now, where you think, I need to do something with that thing. Now, multiply that by all of the things that you have, even just in one room, and you can start to get an idea of the magnitude of a silent to-do list. You start to understand why you can't relax in your own home, why you can't sit still, why you feel unsettled. It's because clutter is subconsciously telling you that you have things to do. It's very much a mental load. That was a huge light bulb moment for me when I read about that, because all of a sudden a lot of things made sense. It's not just about doing the job, it's about mentally keeping track of the job. Like, what needs to be done, when does it need to be done, like, what do I need to have in order to do that job? What are the tools that I need? Who do I need to speak to? Who do I need to delegate to? So when you factor in clutter, you can only imagine how loud that voice is speaking. And again, even if it's subconsciously, you can only get a sense of how much you are actually juggling up here. If you feel uneasy when you walk into a space, that is your red flag. That clutter there is silently trying to tell you to do things rather than to sit down and relax and recharge. Here's a slightly less abstract one then. It is stuff that you think is useful, stuff that you've told yourself could come in handy, and yet you cannot remember the last time that you actually used it. If it were really that useful, you would have used it by now. You might think, well, it's just sitting in a drawer there. It's not really taking up any space. It's not really in the way. But it is, like I said, the silent to-do list aspect of it. Every time you see it, or every time you even look at the drawer that it's in, you're wondering, what does that thing go with? Will I ever use it? It's the mental load. Not only that, but it might be blocking space for other things that would be more useful to you. Or how many times have you had to shove it out of the way to get to something that you actually want? Or how many times have you had something that you do use and love, or something that you've just bought, and you don't know where to put it because your drawers and your cupboards and your closets are already full. It's just taking up physical space, it is taking up mental space. Okay, these next two, I'm kind of going to lump them together because they're both related to buying stuff that essentially you don't need. The first is what I like to call band-aid clutter. It's the stuff that you buy to kind of fill a void. Essentially, you are feeling stressed, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling sad, you're feeling anxious, and you go out and indulge in some retail therapy. You know, when let's say you feel disorganized and you go out and you buy yourself maybe a new planner or a new storage solution, and you think it's all going to be great, but after a week or two, you realize it's not. It hasn't solved the problem that you had. It's because you're buying it as a band-aid. You're buying it as kind of a short-term, temporary fix to a problem that runs much deeper than that. I have basically had to put myself on a buying ban. Like, I just had to stop going to the shops entirely, unless I was doing a food shop, because I would do that. You know, I'd be having a bad day and I would think, oh, well, I'll just run to some store and maybe pick up a book or, you know, something to make myself feel better. Or this space is really messy, I'm going to run out and buy myself some tubs and, you know, get a handle on this once and for all. But all I ended up doing was buying stuff that I just didn't need, buying stuff that was just going to end up as clutter and making me feel even worse. So that's band-aid clutter. That is buying something in the hopes that it will magically solve all of your problems and make your life better, and it just doesn't. The second part of this then is what I like to call forgetful clutter. It is when you buy something because you either can't find the original thing, so you go out and buy a replacement, or you forget that you already have a very similar, if not identical, thing. A good question that I find really helpful here is, if I stopped buying this thing or just stopped buying things in general, would I have enough to last me? Would I have all I would ever need of this thing? So right now, and you can give yourself a time frame, like it doesn't have to be, you know, for the rest of my life, although personally I have enough pens to last me the rest of my life. I know that if I never bought another pen again, I would still be set. But you can also give yourself a smaller time frame. So maybe like 6 months. Would I have enough to last me 6 months? Or would I have enough to last me a year? Like for me, that is definitely true with shampoos and toothpaste. So yeah, this category is basically about overconsumption. It's buying things that you don't need, either to fill a void or because you have lost something or forgotten that you already have that thing. If you stopped buying now, would you already have everything you would ever need for X amount of time or even a lifetime? The next red flag then is for stuff that stays hidden. The sneaky stuff. It is the stuff that is hiding in your closet, at the back of a cupboard or a drawer, maybe in your basement or your attic or your garage. Sometimes I find myself, you know, I'll ask myself the question, if I am putting this thing essentially out of sight, if I am storing something that I am likely never to look at again or very infrequently, like with sentimental stuff, is there really any point in keeping it? Now, I'm not saying like get rid of all of your sentimental stuff, but even just pausing to ask yourself, if I'm about to stash this away in a deep dark corner of my house, you know, if I'm about to shove this into the attic, is there any real point in keeping it? Your home is not a storage unit. It's not for just like keeping stuff around indefinitely. What is the point in doing that? For what purpose Are you keeping this stuff? Like, to what end? When Scout was first born, she had an outfit, the first outfit that she ever wore. My husband washed it with something dark colored and it came out like disgusting. It was all this kind of like bluish gray. It was horrible, and I decluttered it at the time and kind of regretted it afterwards, and for years afterwards I was beating myself up about it. Until I finally realized that even if I had kept it, it would just sit in a storage tub somewhere. I would never look at it again. I had pictures of her, like we have a photograph of her in the outfit. I don't need to keep the actual physical outfit itself. Before you put something away, is there any point in storing this? Like, is that all I'm doing here? Just acting as a storage unit for this stuff? Why keep something that you're never going to look at again, that you're never going to use again, when somebody else could be getting the benefit? Or even if nobody else gets the benefit of it, at least you are freeing up some space in your home. That leads nicely into this next one, which is anything that has negative feelings attached to it, anything that makes you feel bad. And it could take various forms. Like, it might be guilt. Maybe somebody gifted it to you and you feel bad, or maybe you inherited it and you would feel bad getting rid of it. It could be shame. It could be, maybe it's guilt over the fact that you spent a lot of money on it, or even just that you spent money on it in the first place. Maybe you've been carrying it around with you for years and years and letting it take up space. Maybe you started a project that you never finished, and now every time you see it, you feel bad. Or maybe it's something that you keep meaning to do. You have all of the stuff and you're just not doing it. Maybe you promised somebody else that you would make something for them or do something for them, and you haven't. And every time you see something that is related to that thing, you feel bad. It makes you feel bad. For me, it was a lot of baby stuff. I had postnatal depression after my daughter was born, and there were a lot of items, clothing, toys, etc., even photographs, that made me feel awful. Like her hospital notes. I requested a copy of them at the time because we put in a formal complaint with the hospital because of the way we were treated. I'm not going to go into it now, but it was just a really awful situation. And there were certain things, and again, I felt that tug, because on the one hand, I felt obliged to keep that stuff because it was hers, you know, and she was my daughter and I loved her, but I hated the situation and I hated how I felt. And a lot of that stuff didn't have good memories for me. So I can almost guarantee that you have at least one thing, if not many things in your home that make you feel bad. They make you feel guilty, that maybe they make you feel lazy because you haven't dealt with a particular thing. Maybe they make you feel messy. They might make you feel like you're not good enough, you're not working hard enough, you're not doing enough. By getting rid of it, you will stop seeing it and stop being reminded of it, and eventually those feelings will fade, sometimes very quickly. Like, I've had things where I have felt bad, I brought them to the charity shop, got rid of, like, felt bad handing them over, and then as soon as I was out the door, I just felt this massive relief, and I drove home and never thought about those things again. It's not worth flogging yourself with this physical reminder of a negative feeling. Keeping it doesn't change anything. It doesn't get you your money back. It doesn't make you feel better. The opposite is true. You're wasting more and more the longer you keep it. Donate it, recycle it, do whatever you need to do with it, and set yourself free. Let the negative feelings go. Let yourself move on. Let yourself heal from that. There are plenty of other things in your life that are going to be tough. There are going to be plenty of other things that are stressful. You don't need additional things to make life any harder. And then not only will there be stuff that is negatively impacting you, like emotionally, but there could be stuff that is impacting you physically, or that could impact you physically. Something that is hurting you, or that could hurt you or put you in an unsafe position. Physical harm is definitely a red flag. Again, I know there are parallels here with actual relationships. If you are being physically hurt in a relationship, or mentally or emotionally hurt in a relationship, do reach out. You can get help. Stuff can also hurt us in little ways. Maybe we just trip over it a lot, or maybe we bump into it. Maybe we have to kind of shuffle or maneuver around it, or like duck under it, or jump over it, or climb over it. It could be something that has piled up and is in danger of toppling over. There are so many different ways. Maybe just the fact that there's so much of it, maybe it is covered in bacteria or mold, or it is attracting, you know, insects or rodents or something like that. Or it could potentially, because it is sitting there and piling up, maybe your stuff is simply a fire hazard. You know, you've got a pile of boxes in the corner that is essentially just kindling. Maybe it's not even that, like maybe it wouldn't necessarily go up in flames itself, but it could be something that if there were an emergency situation, it could obstruct you, it could impede your escape, it could somehow stop you from getting help. An exercise that can really help here, that can change your perspective or help to highlight certain areas, is to imagine that an elderly person or someone with limited mobility is going to be staying with you for an extended period. Now look around your home and some of those hazards will become more obvious to you. It's the same when, you know, like a baby or a young child is brought into the home. All of a sudden you become hyper aware of all of these sharp corners, all of the dangerous objects, you know, the stairs, the plug sockets, and you start baby proofing things. You make it safer for them. When we start to imagine things through the eyes of someone else, you know, through a baby's eyes, like what are the things that they're most likely to go for, or through a pet's eyes, like what are the things that they're most likely to chew and get into, or from that maybe elderly or limited mobility perspective, what are the things that are going to cause problems or issues or struggles for them. Now let's talk about stuff that, you know, many people mention this and they kind of mention it almost in a joking way, but it can actually have massive negative impacts on someone's life. And again, there will be parallels here with relationships, but a big red flag when it comes to clutter is that it slowly or immediately, quickly isolates you from people and things, activities that you love. It starts to make your world that much smaller because, let's say for instance, your home is cluttered, you feel that it's messy, and you stop inviting people over, or you stop doing things that you love because you can't find the thing that you want to, you know, maybe you want to sit down and craft and you can't find your crafting supplies or the specific thing that you need, like the specific tools, or maybe you just don't have the space to do it because your crafting table is covered in so many other things, or maybe you don't have the time that you would like or the energy that you would like to give to those activities because you spend so much of your time cleaning and tidying and organizing. So if you can't do the things that you love to do, or if you find that you are very hesitant to invite people over, it's time to declutter and give yourself back that time, that space, that energy, and those people that you love. Don't let clutter stand in your way. Don't let it make your world smaller. Don't let it stop you from doing the things that you want to do. I want to give special mention to this one because it's not very explicit. Like sometimes you can't tell why you want to get rid of something, but it comes down to a gut feeling, like following your instincts. You might be ready to let go of something, even if you can't rationally or logically explain why it no longer deserves a space in your home. Like it might be useful, you might like it. There could be a whole load of reasons that kind of would ordinarily tell you that you should keep it, but for some reason you just don't want to. And I've had this recently with clothing. I have found myself just taking things out of my closet and getting rid of them. And I don't know why. There are things that I do like. There are things that I've had for years. There are things that still fit me well and everything. But for some reason, I'm just ready to let them go. And I'm not questioning it. I'm boxing them up, and that's it. Sometimes you just have to trust your gut. Sometimes I feel like there is a mental processing that goes on in the background, and you are subconsciously working through whatever blockages are there. And I think it's because sometimes there's something that you have to process that you're just not aware of. But all of a sudden, one day, you wake up and you think to yourself, it's time. I'm ready. This can go. It's for those times when clutter is trying to tell you that it no longer belongs in your home. You don't have to know exactly why, you just have to know that it's time to part with it. Now, a word of warning here, because you might think, okay, I'm ready. I've seen a whole pile of stuff around me that ticks one of these boxes, waving the red flags all over the place, and I'm ready to let it go. But if you just dive right in and start decluttering all of the things, like emptying out your closet, emptying out a bookcase, you're going to overwhelm yourself. So before you do that, go ahead and check this video where I share how to declutter without the overwhelm. It's all about how to get massive decluttering results without stressing yourself out. Go ahead, have a look at that one, and until next time, gur raibh míle maith agam, agus feici mé sibh se go luath. Slán!